This is power and purpose personified, walking towards justice, fighting for freedom. This is speaking now, empowering the next generation to know how to live with confidence and precision, to move with mastery and meaning. This is a spirit that is free, traveling one coast to the next, escaping the comforts of home. This is finding new friends and exploring the warrior within to destinations amazing, to destinations unknown. This is what it means to keep pounding, to cheer for the home team without hesitation. This is love and life, success and sacrifice. This is Yolanda Trotman, and this is The Conversation.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Happy hump day to you. My name is Yolanda Trotman, and welcome to season 4, y'all. Yes, the season premiere of season 4 of The Conversation with Yolanda Trotman. So first, before we get into anything as far as what this show is about, and of course, everything that we always talk about at the top of the show, let me first say thank you. Thank you so much for your support over the last 4 years, with humble beginnings back in 2019 to having a different vision in 2020. And of course, where we are now, and things have become very much more intentional as far as the nature of this podcast and this pod show, and where we're going as far as what's important and the information that we want to share with you and the conversations that we want to have. So yes. Happy hump day to you. Welcome to The Conversation. I am so excited about this show, and really the 2 shows that we have for the month of February. So by nature of what and how the conversation has changed, we're going to 2 shows a month, and the shows are very intentional, and they're based on generally some sort of a theme. So this month's theme for February is all about love. And I wanted to take it from a different perspective, because we're going to be talking about self-love, self-care tonight. And then our next show next week is going to be talking about relationships and how we are a reflection of our personal selves and how we love on each other. So tonight's show is very much designed, as all of our shows are, but tonight's show is specifically designed for you to participate and for you to ask your questions in a place that is safe. Because what this show is about is not just talking to our very, very special guest, but also tackling the issues that he has an expertise for, and also to make sure that we all understand that it's okay to not be okay. So I call this show The Great Check-In. And when I say the great check-in, you know how everybody says, oh, check in on your strong friends, check in on your friends. And we say that, but do we really do that? And when we talk about checking in on our strong friends, do we really check in on ourselves? Do we really ask ourselves, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Do we look ourselves in the mirror, and do we have a real talk conversation with ourselves in terms of self-assessing where we are in our own mental health? So we're going to be talking about all that tonight. We're going to be talking about coping mechanisms and all of that. So before we jump into it, tonight's show, like I said, is called The Great Check-In, and my guest is none other than the fantastic, fabulous Justin Perry. Before we get started, though, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is The Conversation with Yolanda Trotman. Very easy to find on YouTube. Click to subscribe, ring the bell, slide on over to IG if you haven't already done so, and make sure that you follow. And of course, here on Facebook, make sure you like the Facebook page at The Conversation with Yolanda Trotman. And of course, you can find us at all things at The Combo Pod Show, and simply just put that into your web browser and you'll be able to find it. Now, as far as past shows, all shows from seasons 1 through season 4 that is starting tonight are all at the website at thecombopodshow.com. And that's including our shows that are live here through Facebook and YouTube, as well as our shows that are live through Instagram. So you can catch past shows, you can catch replays there, and you can, of course, do all of that at our YouTube channel, again, which is The Conversation with Yolanda Trotman. So like I said at the top of the hour, if you are just tuning in, or if you catch us at some point in the middle of the show, make sure that you share this broadcast. It is always going to be available by replay. The information that we're going to be disseminating tonight is going to be crucial, and it is specifically designed for audience participation, because we're going to be having some real talk issues in terms of mental health and how it affects different communities, how it affects us personally. So sit back and relax, drop a heart in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. If you have questions, make sure that you drop those in the comments as well. But always feel free to drop your questions or your comments in the chat. So let's get started, shall we? So like I said, what prompted this particular show for me personally was the untimely death of Chesley Chris. So many of you all know her, particularly a North Carolina native, and she passed away due to suicide. And it rocked many of us to see a beautiful, strong, vibrant Black woman period, but specifically a Black woman to pass away by suicide rocked many of us. And I really thought about, well, what does that mean? Because nobody saw it coming. And people who were closest to her didn't see it coming. And I think what has been shocking for many of us, and in particular, as we've seen so much of this in the media, is what that means for our own personal mental health and what that means in a more global perspective. And does it really mean a lot just because the media is shedding more light on it now? Or does that mean that there's really a greater mental health awareness that is long overdue? So with that said, I bring on to the show, many of you all already know him, has such an interesting story, which we're going to jump into first, with him and his staff at Justin Perry Counseling. Charlotte native, welcome to the show, Justin Perry. Mr. Perry, how are you, sir?
I'm great. I appreciate you having me on. So I'm humbled to be here to open up season 4.
Well, I appreciate having you here. So, we talked a little bit about this particular show and why it was so important to be able to tackle these issues now, especially now with the timing. I mean, one of the things that we were talking about is COVID and the impact and some of the things that we're going to talk about throughout the course of the evening. But before we get into that, who is Justin Perry? And I do this with most guests. So I need 3 adjectives, just 3, not a sentence, not a phrase. I need 3 adjectives that describe you. Don't even think about it. Go.
Long-winded.
That's 2. That's 3 words. That's 3. Long-winded. Okay, we'll give you that. Long-winded. Okay.
Passionate. Compassionate.
Okay. And so some of us know, but you're a Charlotte native, yes.
Yes. West Charlotte grad.
And when you decide, so I know your story. So people who don't know your story did not automatically take you into counseling. And for those of you who don't know who Justin is, he's an MSW, LCSW, obviously owns Justin Perry Counseling here in Charlotte. Amazing staff with a variety of services that your particular center offers to people. But your story doesn't begin there. So what were you like as a kid?
I'm gonna say it's gonna sound weird. It's not a humble brag, but I was oddly mature as a kid, and I say that like I remember my parents actually asking me that I want a dog when I was like 7 years old or something like that, and I told them no, I don't want the responsibility. And so I was the oldest of 3 kids, and for me, leadership was something that was important. But I always cared about trying to get along with different people. And so for me, I was big for my age, but I didn't like the idea of people being bullied. I wanted to actually try to step in for people who were being bullied. I liked sports, which I still like now. And I think I was shy. I mean, honestly, I tell people all the time, I'm naturally introverted who kind of became extroverted and forced myself into doing that. So I was a shy kid that I think it's steadily grown into my voice and grown into my body in a way.
And so were you introverted as a child? Do you think you became more introverted as an adult?
No, I think I was probably introverted as a child, but it was one of those things that, again, for me, it was one of those things where I was shy, but I would survey the scene. But once I was comfortable, I was open. Like I said, most of the sports teams I was on, I mean, sports was something that definitely allowed me to open up. In middle school, I took drama, and that that actually opened me up in a different way. I think just in terms of relaxing and because I was always serious. I was always pretty intense about things, but that's something that allowed me to open up in a lighthearted kind of way. But I think for me, I steadily became more outspoken. I was outspoken in a way as a kid, but I've steadily gotten more outspoken as I've gotten older, I would say.
Okay, so I just feel like you kind of glossed over that. Like, what were you like? What would your mama say about you? Like, what were you really like?
No,
I mean, because I get it, you were introverted, but were you sneaky? Did you get away with stuff? Come on now, Justin. You just trying to give us the surface level answer. Let's dig deeper.
So here's the thing: you had to be sneaky because my mom was a teacher who was a teacher at my elementary school. So I had to learn very early. Getting in trouble was not for me. All right. And so, because when I got in trouble, I didn't go to the principal's office. I got sent to my mom. And so that just meant extra embarrassment and everything else. I had to learn very quickly that getting in trouble was not my path. As you get older and you want to do certain things, I mean, you figure out how to do certain things. But again, you got to keep it in between the ditches. So like I said, I was one of those kids. I always say, I think about high school. I was laughing with some friends recently. There was a group of us that were steadily skipping a class at the end of the day. You just go to Bojangles or something like that. And everybody else's parent who was doing that, they got called. They didn't call my parent. And so, but when my friends asked, did they call your parents? I was like, yeah, man, it was messed up. Because I was like, look, if I told them they hadn't called my parents, then I knew I was going to get lit up. So it's one of those things. My parents never knew about it unless they're watching that right now. So, but so yeah, so I mean, I think I was a good kid who, I socialized, but yeah, I mean, if I did something, I had to sneak. But my parents, we had boundaries, man. That's all I can say, Yolanda. I can't give you any more than that. I can't give you any more than that. All right.
Okay, y'all. I tried. Now tell me about your parents. Your mother was a teacher. I'm a teacher's kid too. My mom was my high school biology teacher, Justin, and I had her twice. So explains a lot. Anyway, so tell me about your parents.
Yeah, no. So my mom was a teacher. She was from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. My dad was in car sales, and he came from Brooklyn. And so I always like to say I'm a combination of both my parents. My mom, definitely in terms of that compassion, that wanting to help and everything else. But my dad also just in how expressive he is, but then also his own experiences, I think, with dealing with corporate America always pushed him to tell me to kind of try to establish my own thing. And oddly, I actually never planned to do that. It kind of fell to me. And I think, it's one of those things where when I look at myself, I feel like I'm a combination of both my parents. I feel like my dad and I, when I was younger, we bumped heads a lot more. But it's one of those things that we used to have to argue before we actually talked, right? And as I've gotten older, he and I just have more conversations, and I'm able to look back at things, and he's able to look back at things, and you see it through a different lens now. And I mean, I was mama's boy. I mean, I was 100% mama's boy, and my dad worked a lot of hours. He worked like 70 hours a week, and so for me, when he was in the house, it was almost kind of like, well, I'm here all the time, and now you're coming in and trying to lay down the law. You hadn't been around this thing and everything else like that. But I realized now that it's like he was thinking, look, I'm busting my behind out here, and then I come here, and now you're not following the line the right way. And so, no, I'm very grateful for both my parents. I say all the time that again, I know they're foundational to where I am today.
So where'd you go to high school?
I went to West Charlotte. Dub C, Lions all day, everywhere you go. So we're out here, and so I know you had Robert Corbett Kelly on one time, so another Lion. So yeah, West Charlotte through and through.
So for those of you who just are tuning in, make sure you drop in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Trinavia, I see you. Angie, I see you as well. So check in, let us know where you are watching from. And obviously, if you have questions as we proceed, please make sure you drop those in the comments so that we can address as many as you can, because we've got a lot of ground to cover. So you graduate from West Charlotte. What's the plan at that point?
So I go off to UNC Chapel Hill, and I had actually I went to Chapel Hill with the plan of coming back to Charlotte. I always I remember the CBI, the Community Building Initiative. They had their initial launch when I was in high school, and I remember going to that and thinking to myself, I'm going to come back to Charlotte because I want to make a difference. I was a high schooler then. And so at that point, the plan was to go to law school. I was going to be like you. You know, I had met James Ferguson at West Charlotte. And when I was at West Charlotte, that was in the midst of the Swan case that was basically ended desegregation. And so I had friends, a group of us that all went down to the courthouse to protest, right? Because we knew it would lead us to ultimately a lot of what we've seen, which is, you know, very separate and very unequal. And so I went off Chapel Hill, plans to go to law school. Obviously, every girl you meet, you tell them you're pre-law, and you say, yeah, well, you know, that's where I was. But there was another plan for me. You know, in the midst of my being up there, my first sophomore year is what I like to call it. My first sophomore year, I fell into a deep depression. Had some real significant anxiety, and was just kind of shutting down. And again, I was somebody who was always very social and everything else like that, but I wasn't social. I wasn't leaving my room except to go get food. And I basically would put on a hood on my head, go grab my food. I'd come back to the dorm. I was skipping my classes. I was screening my phone calls. I was hiding out. I would stay up late, maybe playing video games, sleep during the day. So again, I'm seeing nobody. And but in my head, I kept thinking to myself, I got this under control. I kept rationalizing to myself that I'm going to figure my way out of this. I had actually at one point made a plan to transfer, and I was like, I'm transferring to an HBCU. I had all these things in my mind, and I always joke about that. I'm always tell people, I'm like, this is how you know you're not rational when you're depressed or anxious or whatever else. Like, you're in the process of not going to any classes, which means you're about to have a transcript full of Fs, but you're talking about you're going to transfer to somewhere else. Like, somebody's going to really want you coming there, but it made sense to me at the time. And so at one moment, a friend of mine who, she went to West Charlotte as well. I'd known her since second grade. She came by. She didn't call. She just kind of basically came to the door and was like, hey, we're going to go eat tonight. You know, not you're going to get food and come back to your dorm, but we're going to go eat. And so we went, we ate. And in the midst of it, you know, I kind of let her know what was going on. And she said, you know, that doesn't sound like you. You know, don't you think you maybe should talk to somebody? And it doesn't seem like a lot, but that was just enough to break up the momentum of the hole that I was digging myself. And so I ultimately went, talked to the dean, had to leave school, you know, I had to take a withdrawal, and they said, you can go home. You can do some work on yourself, AKA go to counseling. You can come back in the summer and take these classes, and we see if you do well, then you can come back. And if not, you know, basically thanks for the memories. And so I was a 20-year-old home in Charlotte, not in college, not regular working world. And it was just like, I'm kind of in no man's land. And so I actually start to talk to a counselor. And Yolanda, you talk about the denial, the first 3 sessions, I still was sitting there. I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I might want to do this. And so I'm starting to think about, I'm approaching this like an internship. I'm instead of me recognizing I'm the client, I'm trying to impress this guy. And about a 3rd session, he looks at me, he just says, you're talking to me like we're peers. We're not peers. You're here because you got a problem, and either you get real about that or you're wasting both of our times. And it was just kind of like, it hit me. And so I started getting real, and I started learning about people pleasing and a lot of stuff that I did, because I mean, truthfully, when I was struggling not just because of me. I was struggling because I was thinking about all the people I was letting down. You know, I was letting down my family. I was letting down Little Rock AME Zion Church, where I grew up. I was letting down West Charlotte. I was letting down just period, everybody who had poured into me. And so I started getting real there, and I ended up getting a job. A woman, Joanne Stratton Tate, gave me a job at a place, United Family Services, that used to be here in town. And I was answering phones, and I heard about this thing called the MSW, this Masters of Social Work thing.
Let me pause you there for a second.
Yeah,
Let me pause you there for a second, because I want to shout out a couple of people, and two, I don't know if this is the actual term, but I want to unpack a couple of things that you said. So first of all, Deb, we see you. Brittany Johnson, Dub C alum, watching from Dallas, Fort Worth. Curtis, I see you from Vegas. Dr. May, see you all checking in. If you're just joining us, make sure you drop in the comments where you're watching from. Check in as we do the great check-in. So for those of you who just joined us, Justin was telling us about his story in terms of when he was suffering himself from depression at age 20 as a sophomore. Now, what year was that? I'm not trying to age you, but what year was that? Because I think that's important.
So it would have been the fall of 2020, heading into the spring of 2020. Look, excuse me, 2000.
I'm about to say, wait a minute, Justin. What?
Let me be honest right here. Yeah, fall of 2000 to the spring of 2001. So over 20 years, what we're saying is that's where we're really at, right? So yeah.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you this: if we're talking about 20 years ago, you're leaving Charlotte, you're leaving the protective environment of West Charlotte High School, you're going to now a PWI, predominantly white institution, Carolina. How much of that do you think had something to do? Do you think that impacted you at all in terms of that transition? Or do you think there were other issues that kind of got you to that point of realizing that you needed to make some changes?
I think it was a both and so it's one of those things where I had situations where I had been, even at West Charlotte, I consider my calculus class, I remember being the only Black student in there, right? So I've been in situations, I played baseball and basketball. Baseball, I've been in a situation where I was one of the only Black people on some of my teams. But I think I remember, I can still remember that in 2000, it was in the midst of that Gore-Bush election and everything else. And but I was the only Black student in my suite, and which again didn't automatically throw anything off. But I think just in school, you started hearing, now we talk about microaggressions, right? And you hear people say certain things, but you would hear, well, I'm not talking about you, you're different, right? And I remember having, it was one of those things where I had that moment. I had friends, we would joke about talking about my Malcolm phase versus my Martin phase. And the phase of I'm willing to work with white people versus I'm tired of getting worked by white people, right? And I can remember having like this crisis that was just like, hold on. So if you say this in front of me, but then you say you're not talking about me, what this means is you're going somewhere else probably, and you're saying this, and when they call you out, you're saying, no, one of my best friends is Black, and you're using me as that, and so I'm ultimately giving you cover, right? Which is never what my purpose has ever been, is to give anybody cover. And I started thinking, I was like, am I doing more harm than good? And I remember that was part of me stepping back and saying, do I want to / need to transfer to an HBCU? Ultimately, the decision I made was to come back and face things and to shift the way I responded and everything else. But no, that certainly was a part of it. But part of it too, Yolanda, was that I think the first time I started dealing with any anxiety was actually in high school. I just didn't know that's what it was. It was just, I had a rough semester, but it was good enough that it didn't show up the way that it kind of burned in that semester I had then.
So for those of you tuning in now, once we transition now is the time, if you can, go ahead and drop in the comments questions that you have, because we're going to be talking about various mental health issues, mental health awareness, ripple effects, stigma. We're going to have a deep dive into mental health awareness as it relates to the church. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about it. The criminal justice system. So feel free to drop in your questions now, because I want to make sure that we can get to as many as we can. Tony, we see you watching from Mississippi. Miss Diane from Charleston, South Carolina. Kenny and Paula from Charlotte. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you drop in where you're watching from. And yes, Paula, of course, we're going to blow the whistle, girl. You know how we do. All right. So now you come back and you finish what you start at UNC at Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to get back to what you were saying, though, because you were talking about how you were trying to basically finesse your therapist. Let's just talk about it. Yeah. In terms of what you were dealing with and trying to convince him. so to speak. So it's interesting that he said, you're not my peer, you're here because you need help. So what was the aha moment, or the moment that you realized that, one, the therapy was helpful, and two, what the underlying issues were you felt like that even created the depression symptoms in the first place?
Yeah, so we started just talking about, the idea of people pleasing. And again, like I said, I was always somebody, I was able to get along with a large set of people. And again, it's a blessing and a curse. My senior superlative was most courteous, right?
Most dependable.
Right. There we go. Right. Exactly. And so it's one of those things where, again, I stood up for myself, but I was always, again, able to manage finding ways to stay friendly with folks. Right. But one of the things you realize is that in certain situations, you can't always do that. Right. In certain situations, you have to be willing to, whether it's to lose a connection, whether it is for somebody's feelings to be hurt or whatever else it was. But I was always one who would kind of put my feelings aside for somebody else. And I think that was one of those things that really stood out to me in therapy. And when I learned, like I said, in the midst of that, when I was working at UFS, when I learned about the MSW, it was like, I learned that you could do therapy, which appealed to me, but it also had a social justice lens, which I wanted to do civil rights law. So I was like, man, I felt like there was a degree that was made for me. And all of a sudden I felt like I had a purpose. And so I had a purpose to go back to prove to myself that I could do what I knew I was capable of, but also to confront things versus to kind of run from them. And again, that's not me saying that if I would have made a decision to transfer, that would have been me running from it. But I always say there's a difference between running to versus running from. And for me, in that time, it would have been running from. So that was the aha moment for me. And I was like, I committed at that point, I want to go this route. When I wrote my personal statement, I wrote about what I got and wanting to give it back to others. And so that was the shift for me. And this is the path for me. And I would say this field chose me. I didn't choose it.
And so did you go when you left and you were out and withdrew at that point, did you decide that that's what you wanted to do as far as social work, or was there another step in your journey before you decided to go back into that?
So I wanted to be sure. So in my mind, I was like, that's what I want to do. But then what I did was I stayed connected with United Family Services. And every summer I'd come home and I'd work at camp at South Side of Brook Hill, neighborhood there, South Tryon Community Church. And we actually, the last year, we did the initial pilot Freedom School for kids from there in Wilmore. And I was like, I'm pretty sure still is what I want to do. And then when I graduated, I was like, just to be sure, I went to Thompson Child and Family Focuses. I worked 2 years there in their day treatment. And one of the things I saw there, again, all of our kids had severe trauma, right? But one of the things I saw was even just the difference, even in diagnoses for Black children versus other children, but even the commentary that I saw sometimes, and this is from all staff, including us, that sometimes when they were talking about kids that happen to look like us, they would talk about street behavior. And I was like, at one point, I had to wait until my probationary period was over. But I said during one of our meetings, I said, I keep noticing that we use the term street behavior, and all those kids that we talk about street behavior happen to have skin that looks like mine. And I'm wondering if we look at their behavior as street behavior versus as an expression of trauma, does that impact the way we're responding to them? And we actually had a strong conversation, but then I started looking at diagnoses and seeing conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, things that when you get older lead to what they call antisocial personality disorder or jail versus post-traumatic stress disorder, right? That's trauma, that's treatment and everything else. And so I remember thinking to myself, again, I want to be a part of interrupting what I'm seeing. And that was when it confirmed for me, this is the route I'm going. I went back to Chapel Hill for grad school and came back to Charlotte.
And so your undergraduate degree was in what specifically?
Psychology and sociology.
Okay. And so went back to get your MSW and then of course your other certifications after that.
Yes.
So do you feel like then, because I want to stay there for a second, because you and I talked offline, and I think this is very important. And hey, Judge Havelka, I see you just popped on. And this is actually a good segue, because one of the things having started my career as a public defender, having been on the bench and all of that, is how we criminalize mental health issues and how it has such a tremendous impact within the criminal justice system. And I don't even think people really realize that. So, I mean, I could talk about it from my perspective, but from your perspective, in terms of what do you see? Now, I'm talking about substance abuse issues all the way to diagnosed mental health issues. Mm-hmm. So let's just make this very plain for the audience. When you say mental health issues, what does that mean and what does that encompass? And then let's talk about what that means as far as the impact with the criminal justice system.
Absolutely. So obviously, so when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about depression, when we're talking about anxiety, again, everybody experiences some level of sadness, some level of worry, some level of mood changes. But there's things, I mean, there's levels when it starts impacting our functioning, so again, whether it's that depression or that anxiety, it impacts my job, my relationships, school, or things like that, things that used to be important to me. There's bipolar, which is where we kind of can have the high highs and the low lows. There's other psychotic types of illness where, again, I may think things are real that are not real. I may see or hear things. There's also substance use. I treat that as well. So I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist. And so again, and the thing is, all of these things kind of interconnect. And so I think, so when we talk about making it plain, Yolanda, I think to me, making it plain is recognizing that I'll take it even a step further. When we talk about criminalizing mental health, we criminalize Black mental health, right? Like, and I have
wait, say that again. Say it again. Say it again. And what does that mean?
What that means is that you can have two people doing the exact same thing, having the exact same illnesses that receive very different treatment. Yeah, and that could be in the school system, that could be in childcare, that could be in the criminal justice system. And again, you see these patterns play out all the way through. And if you think about, I always tell people, having worked now almost 14 years in the field of substance use, I always say, if you want to understand injustice, all you got to do is look at drugs and alcohol, right? Because if you look at who uses and sells the most drugs and alcohol, it looks very different than who does the most incarceration for drugs and alcohol, right? And so in my world, my first 2.5 years after grad school, I worked in Stanley County, Albemarle, rural, when people think of the book Hillbilly Elegy, a lot of those things you saw the opioid.
Wait, what kind of shade is that? Okay, I'm sorry, we caught it. Keep going.
No, I'm saying
Did you say hillbillyology?
No, Hillbilly Elegy is a book. It's a book.
Oh, elegy. Yeah. Oh, my bad. I thought you were throwing shade. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Shade.
Carry on.
I still got love for Stanley County. I tell all the time. I'm like, see the
my
news?
Bad. I'm not trying to start. So my apologies.
Don't create beefs out there. Hey, I made it back. So I made it back all the time. So, but yeah, I mean, but the thing is, it's just like you can see a direct parallel between what's going on there versus what you may see, in lower income parts of Charlotte. And you see left folks without access to good health care, good education, good jobs. And you see intergenerational poverty. You see intergenerational trauma. Again, things we call generational curses. You can see the same thing. The only difference is race and rural versus urban. Now, when you start dealing with the way incarceration looks, again, I remember when I worked here, I first worked at Anuvia Prevention and Recovery. I worked there for about 5 years. And I remember just looking at the paths of who was coming in, right? And I would have, white clients from the suburbs and things like that. And most of the time they were being referred because somebody was like, hey, you need help, maybe a DWI or something like that. But I was having Black clients come in regularly with marijuana charges and things like that on probation. And a lot of my white clients would look at them like, marijuana, they don't consider that a drug because of all of the stuff they were doing, right? And that's not me downplaying the reality of what marijuana can be for certain people. But what I would notice was that when I was doing those assessments, when I do the criminal justice, the criminal history, it looked very different. The longest assessment I ever did was on a white woman who was about 55 years old. She had done every drug in the book at high levels. And then we finally got the criminal history. And so I asked her about that, and she said, I don't have one. I guess I've just been lucky. And I remember I was like, right now I got to be the clinician versus the advocate and activist. But I mean, I wanted to basically say you were lucky to have the complexion for protection, because there's no way you would have used all of these different substances without a criminal history. Whereas again, a lot of my Black clients had not even hardly drank alcohol. It was marijuana alone, but they've got 3 years, 5 years, 7 years hanging over their head. And so I think it's just really important, again, when we look at even the way we respond to the opioid epidemic, right? I say it again, there's a reason why, when I hear law enforcement say things like, we can't arrest our way out of the opioid epidemic. Well, you couldn't arrest your way out of the crack epidemic either. Like, you can't arrest your way out of addiction, but it's not about the ability, it's about the willingness. And there's a willingness to take a holistic approach to the health and to the traumas and responding to that of white people in a different way than it is for Black people. And again, and I say this, no matter where I am, what audience I'm in, all people bleed, but all blood is not respected the same. And that's one of the things I've seen directly in my field, but it's also something I feel like I have to call out and then call us in to do things differently.
And so I want to step back to a little bit of your personal story, particularly for those of you who may not have heard part of this at the beginning of the hour. And of course, check in, let us know where you're calling or where you're watching from. And of course, share this. But you were very open in the fact that you dealt with depression yourself as a 20-year-old. How long do you feel like it took for you to be able to feel like you were getting on the other side of it? And since that was some 20 years ago, tell me about the stigma. Like, what was the stigma? Did you feel comfortable being able to even talk about it to anybody other than immediate family?
Sure. So initially, no, right? I tell people all the time, like, there's a journey, like for me, it's the journey of figuring out how to own my story versus my story owning me. When this first started, my story was owning me. Like I said, I was back in Charlotte and I wasn't supposed to be. I was supposed to be in school. And so, I mean, even going to the store, my hope was I don't run into anybody who knows me. Right? Because I come up with my story of why I'm here and everything else like that. But over time, I got to be able to see that as a part of the puzzle that makes up me. Ultimately, that friend who helped me out is now my wife and the mother of my kids, right? Mm-hmm. And so I can say things like that. Again, that was one of the darkest times of my life, but out of it, there was so much light and brightness that's come out of it. And so part of why I'm so out in the open right now, Yolanda, is because for me, modeling that this is not something to be ashamed of is important, because that's what allows us to free ourselves a lot sooner. Like, a large part of, honestly, probably what kept me in the cycle of not moving forward was the shame. Again, it was the shame. And I was like, man, I can't let anybody see me looking like this, feeling like this, thinking like this. And so to me, part of now, like we talk at our organization, promote healing in stigma. With that, what we're saying is, like, we want to promote people getting better. In the same way that I'm going to address knee pain, I'm going to address heart pain, I'm going to address brain pain, emotional pain. And I don't have to be ashamed of it. And so again, it was a journey getting there. I would say for me, what I did was I figured out what my story was going to be when I first came back. When I first went back that fall, and that story evolved through my graduation. But I acknowledged the fact that, hey, I was having a rough time. I wasn't myself. And, and it started there, right? And I was telling people, say something simple at first. Then it evolved to the fact that, yeah, I was down, and I was dealing with depression, something I never really felt looked that way. But I'm bouncing back now. And so for me, I look at it as the initial bounce back happened once I hit my footing on campus in that summer, and then definitely in that fall, but also recognize it's something that it's an ebb and a flow. It's a dimmer switch more than a light switch. There's things that around anxiety, around depression that will still creep in with me, right? And like, you don't look at it through the lens of like it's permanently gone. I look at, okay, I'm dealing with it well for right now. And I may have a rough day, but I'm going to work through that rough day. And but it's a journey that way.
So I'm going to ask those of you who are watching, and I think this is particularly important as we're talking about awareness. If you've ever been in situations where you felt like you may have been dealing with something that could be a mental health issue, whether it's anxiety, depression, things of that nature, drop a heart in the comments if you are so inclined to do so, because that's one of the things that's so important. We have to get away from this stigma. I was doing some research, the National Alliance of Mental Health, there's some of their numbers. And while they were saying in 2020, 21% of adults had to deal with some sort of mental health issue, whether it's depression, whatever the case may be. And then they broke it down racially. And at 17%, for example, African American, those people, but what was really interesting, and I don't know if you agree or disagree on this, but people who reported or self-report themselves as biracial, and those who are LGBTQ, the numbers were so much higher. 32% for those who were biracial or identified as biracial, as much as 44% for those who identify as LGBTQ. And so I found that to be fact. And this is just 2020 numbers. And this is talking about while we're in the middle of a pandemic and all of those things on top of it. I would be dropping a heart in the comments if I was watching it now, because I remember that anxiety in 2020, probably between March and where we all thought, oh, it's a couple weeks, we'll be back in a month. And it was like, okay, a couple months, I can deal with that. And it's like, wait, hold on.
Yes.
Now it's 6 months. And now we're thinking about, okay, now we got to make ends meet. We got mortgages to pay. We have all of those things. And so I think all of us, if we're completely honest, will be dropping a heart, because I can't imagine anybody that there's not a single person watching this either now or catching a replay did not feel that. But I think a lot of us probably had a hard time identifying what that actually was, because we may never had experienced that. Like, I didn't know that was, I just know I was tired all the time and I didn't feel like doing anything. I identified that as just, oh girl, you just being lazy. Get up and go for a run, go walk, go do something. And I didn't understand what that was until I actually took the time to talk to somebody about it and started to develop some coping mechanisms to get past the stress and the worry and the anxiety. And so I appreciate for those of you who are open enough to be able to drop that in the comments. Chris, I see you. Chandria, thank you for jumping in. Norvita, Fred, all of you who are dropping in, because I think that's important. And I think it's so important that for you to help us understand, like, what's the difference between being anxious and having actual diagnosed anxiety, or feeling depressed or sadness and actually having what could be diagnosed depression. Obviously, I'm not asking for assessments, but I'm just saying, so help us understand, for those of us who are watching or listening, like, what's the difference between the two?
Definitely. And so I'm gonna respond directly to it. The first thing I'm gonna say is, if you got any kind of concerns at all, it's okay to check and reach out to somebody, right? And you know, in the same way, that's, like I said, I don't have to wait to have a heart attack to go to the doctor. Like, if I feel something that doesn't feel right, I can at least go check to be what it is. If I hear something that sounds weird in my car, I don't have to wait for it to smoke to go take it and get it checked out, right? And so I always tell people, like, don't, like, very clearly, diagnosis, really quick, I'm going to just start with that. Diagnosis is for two things. One, insurance, billing, stuff like that. Like, that is some of that. But then second, it's to help us be able to conceptualize what's going on, to help you understand the symptoms so we can talk about what's the way to deal with it. It's not about labeling you, it's about labeling what you're experiencing, right? And I think sometimes what keeps us from going is we're worried about being labeled as an individual. And I always say I'm labeling your symptoms, but I mean, if you look at the difference, again, you may have, like you said, sadness, you may have worry, you may have these things, but the difference is it changing things that are important to me? Am I having a harder time getting my job done? Am I having a harder time with my relationships? Am I having a harder time motivating myself to do things that I used to do well? Am I having a harder time focusing? You know, is it impacting things that are important? It comes down to functioning. Are there significant shifts in my diet where I'm not hungry, you know, not eating much at all, or I'm going in the other way where I'm just like constantly eating and can't get enough, you know? Or is it sleep wise, I just can't sleep? Or is it that I can sleep for 12 hours and still feel tired, right? And so you're looking at all those kinds of functioning things. And that's the difference, because again, you're going to have times where you feel sad, right? If somebody dies and they're close to me, I'm going to feel sad. That doesn't necessarily mean it's depression. That just may be grief, right? But if I'm still struggling years down the road, I'm struggling way down the road, and I'm not able to do those things that matter, it's okay to go and check in. And you can check in for grief. And I think that's the thing, Yolanda, I want to make sure people hear is like, you don't have to have a specific firm diagnosis. One of the diagnoses that we'll talk about is an adjustment disorder. I mean, think about it. It's saying that I'm having a hard time adjusting to something. Maybe I moved to a new town and I'm struggling with some anxiety there. It's just adjustment disorder with anxiety. And so if you're feeling off, reach out to somebody. Most people will do like a free 15-minute consultation if it feels right. You can do an assessment. And sometimes if I'm working with somebody, we may just say, honestly, what you're going through seems appropriate for what's happening in your life. Now, if you want help trying to figure out how to navigate that, we can do that. If you're worried about, is there something quote unquote wrong with you? There's not, And so I think if you have a question at all, reach out to somebody. That's the first thing I would just say.
So excellent point. So somebody watching or knows somebody who may be having some struggles, where would you tell them to go and get help? They don't have health insurance. Money may be tight. Where can they go to be able to get some help, to be able to talk to someone?
Yeah, so there's various things you can do. So, I mean, there's a reduced rate thing, Open Path Collective, that is something that has, reduced rates on there. Like if you go to psychologytoday.com, that'll give you access to a lot of therapists all around. And one of the things I'll tell people is look and see if somebody offers a sliding scale, because if you see the word sliding scale, what that means is that even though they may have rates that they charge, they may have a certain amount of clients they may take at a reduced rate all the way down to no rate at all, right? So currently my organization has an intern, right? And so for the sessions with my intern, it's $0 to $25 a session, right? And so really, and I'm saying 0 to 25 is just based on your participation. And so there's a lot of different options from that standpoint. Go on the county website. We're in the midst of changing providers there and everything else that had been Cardinal. We're in the process of changing that. But I would say start in those places. Start at Psychology Today, start at Open Path Collective, reach out to NAMI, reach out to MHA.
And what is NAMI for people who don't know what that is?
That is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. MHA is the Mental Health of America's Central Carolinas. So again, there's Teen Health Connection here in town as well. There's Safe Alliance for folks dealing with domestic violence. And so there's a lot of different options just to check out. And the last thing I'll say is and not even as a plug, but yeah, if you want to reach out directly to my organization, our office assistant, Barjan, does a great job. She's a peer support specialist, which means that she navigates her own mental health challenges. But Promise Resource Network is another place that I think is important to lift up. But she can also help. We'll make sure that we get you connected, because I always tell people, for me, it's not simply a matter of whether someone does something with somebody who's working in my agency. It's do people find what they need, and so there's ways to get connected. And then I'll just add to substance use like Anuvia, McLeod. There's other places like that as well. So
there's so much we can cover. I can already tell you right now, we're going to need because I want to talk about the church and mental health issues. As you should. We're going to scratch the surface. We definitely are not going to have time to get into that tonight. So we're going to have to do a part 2. JustinPerryCounseling.com, 704-908-4061. I'll also put that in the chat. I also put the 2 locations in the chat so that you can gather some more information. But I want to make sure that people understand, because we said that the difference between being depressed and having sadness. One of the big ones, though, and for those of you who are just tuning in, understanding the difference, for example, in adjustment disorder and what that means. You explained that beautifully. But anxiety is a little different, because we kind of understand sort of what depression means, but anxiety is very different. So what's the difference between having an anxious moment and actually having anxiety, because I saw that in a couple of the comments as well, as far as dealing with various types of anxiety. And I really appreciate those of you who are willing to drop a heart in the comments. If you didn't catch it and you've dealt with some sort of an issue that you felt like may have been potentially a mental health issue, you can still drop in the comments so we can kind of address them that way too.
Yeah. So there's a healthy level of butterflies almost, even if something as simple as coming on the show with you tonight, right? So there's a level of kind of like, all right, we're about to get on here. But when you're talking about, anxiety that's reaching another level, again, it's stopping me from doing certain things I need to do. Sometimes it may be creating these pains I can feel in my stomach, because sometimes people don't recognize it. It's just like, I just got a stomach ache. Sometimes I just got a headache. Sometimes I can see these shifts and again, my heart race and sweat and things
Bubble
like
guts.
that. Yeah.
Let's keep it real, Justin. We keep it real here.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, let me ask the question differently for people watching. What's the difference? We all get a little bubble guts, not food related, but you know what I mean? You just like, and it manifests that way. What's the difference between that and an anxiety issue that we should be concerned about? Because there's a natural fight or flight, there's natural adrenaline rushes, there's all of that part is natural. But when should we be concerned if that bubble guts or that anxiety or whatever, the heart racing and all of that is something that is a little bit more than that?
Yeah. The question, am I able to still get the job done? Right. And how much am I struggling to get the job done? Because lots of times what happens with anxiety is it either just really bogs down how efficiently we do things because we're able to do them normally, but it's like something that normally would take me 10 minutes to do. It's taking me hours and more to do because I'm just sometimes what we call ruminating, which means I'm just thinking about it and obsessing over it. So again, I always look at, is it getting me in the way of me doing what is important for me? And again, what's important to me may be getting my job done, right? Like what's important to me may be showing up for something. Like I have a meeting I'm supposed to go to, and I can't get myself to leave the house. I can't get myself to go into the meeting. I may even pull into the parking lot and sit there and not be able to psych myself. I could have gotten there 15 minutes early, but because I've sat there for so long thinking about this, I end up walking in 15 minutes late or not at all, right? And so what I always say is, again, is looking at what are the important things that are for you to do in your life as an individual. If you're a parent, right? I'm struggling to be attentive to my kids in the way that I've been able to do before, the way that I know I'm capable of when I'm at my best, because I just can't, it's like I can't get out of my own way, and so I always tell people anxiety is one of those things that it's a chihuahua. And if you think about it, like a lot of chihuahuas, they bark really loud, but if you step firmly to it, lots of times they'll scatter. But the more that I avoid it, the bigger it gets, and it starts to feel like a big Doberman and everything else, and things just become overwhelming. I can't do it, something that I've been able to do forever, and now I just can't even. I have no hope of doing it. I'm just procrastinating. I'm just struggling.
So let's say somebody's watching this, or they know someone that may be dealing with some struggles, and this is actually one of the questions that I had. So, what do you, in your experience, what do you think one of the most, or some of the most common myths are about seeking counseling? Period.
Common myth is you got to be quote unquote crazy, right? And then that's not a word that's in my vernacular, but I think like the idea, I think is the idea that it's like when people hear like the idea of counseling means that something has to be drastic, right? One, things don't have to get drastic. Again, the car does not have to smoke to get it checked on, and we're the car in this situation. I think another common myth is that counseling is not for everybody. And when I say that, like, it doesn't mean you can take other paths, right? But again, it is for anybody who desires it. It's just a matter of us making sure that we make sure it's accessible. Another myth is if I don't have enough money, there's no way I can get help. All right. There are ways to get help. All right. And the other myth is that it's a sign of weakness. And I'm gonna say this especially say this for men. I'm going to say this for Black men. I'm going to say this for Black women. Again, the idea, a lot of times we had that idea that our ancestors overcame so much and they were in worse situations than we were. I should be able to deal with this little bit of stuff that I'm dealing with, right? And I always say we have to really break through that idea, because there's a difference between getting through life versus thriving, right?
Ooh, say that again.
I
Say
think
that again.
we have to stop just trying to get through. I think we deserve the right to thrive and to have joy and to have fulfillment. And I think understanding that counseling can be a part of that puzzle for you.
And so I want to stay there for a second because, there's this, particularly in social media, even how we interact with each other. And I said this at the top of the hour, how we always say, go check on your strong friends, especially when we see tragedies in the news, such as Chesley and others. And we always say that, but we really don't do that. If we're being honest, we really don't check on our strong friends, or we don't check in the way that we normally would. So, and of course we know the myth, or I won't say the myth, that's probably not a better way to describe it, but how Black women in particular, there's a definition of being a strong Black woman versus the reality of being a strong Black woman, or how Black men in particular, but specifically Black men are taught not to be expressive in their emotions, that are taught to be hyper masculine, or women to dim down their femininity, to be strong for whatever that situation is. And I'm sure a lot of men and a lot of women deal with that every day, even in code switching and trying to adjust and from one environment, from a corporate environment to, being able to be yourself. And so all of those things kind of interconnect, and it creates for some of these issues with depression and anxiety and all of that. But what would you say to a man, specifically a Black man that's watching this tonight, who has some struggles, but wasn't ready to make the decision that you made as a sophomore in college? But they think something may be wrong, but they're not ready to commit to commit to get some help yet. What would you say particularly to a Black man? And I'm saying this specifically for Black folks because of how we are socialized to be stronger and all of that, and what all that means. And we'll get to that in another show. But what would you say to a Black man specifically? And then what would you then say to a Black woman?
Definitely. So start with a Black man. I would say, I think we need to, first of all, let's shift the way we use the word strong. Second, let's shift the way we use the term man up. To me, I think we got to reclaim those terms. I think those are terms that have been given to us, but we've been miseducated, right? And I think that the thing I would say is, I don't like, if I'm reaching out to a Black man, you don't have to commit to anything. Just commit to having a conversation with somebody. Like, I'm not saying you need to commit to counseling once a week or whatever. It's like, commit to an initial conversation and see where it goes from there. And what I would say is that, honestly, there's a phrase in the recovery community that says surrender to win. Like, lots of times I think what happens is we're brought up, especially as boys, to become men. We're not brought up with a full menu of emotions, right? We're allowed to be happy in the right situation. We're allowed to be excited, especially if my team wins, whatever it's like that. But any emotion that's uncomfortable, the only emotion we're allowed is to be pissed off, right? And I always tell people, like, underneath, what I've learned is anger is a secondary emotion, and it's often the shield for more vulnerable emotions. Often what's going on is I'm hurt, I'm embarrassed, I'm confused, I'm ashamed, I'm worried. I can say for me, even you talk about this, how this stuff goes on, even just, I remember having kids, right? Like, this exciting thing, but all of a sudden that worry of like, man, what if I got to make sure I'm on point, not just for me anymore, not just even for me and my wife, but for this little person. And that excitement, but also that feeling of pressure that lots of times that, again, we don't talk about it out loud, but I guarantee you, folks that are watching this and folks that are not watching this, Black men know exactly what I'm talking about. And what I just want to say is, like, look, it's natural, man. It's natural. It's real. It's time to get some relief. Like, all of those myths we have about, women being emotional and men being rational, whatever, like, that's all a bunch of crap. Like, we got to cut the crap is what I would say. I always say, like, the people who die the most by suicide are men. The people who commit the most homicides are men, right? And so homicide and suicide are both emotional things. The issue is not that we're not emotional. The issue is that we're not given space or given the tools to be emotional in a healthy and constructive way. And it's time for us to start doing this now so we can do it for the next generation of boys, and they can get it at an earlier stage than we did, and then they can pass it on to the next generation. And I'm saying that we've had enough hurt in all of these generations. If anybody is worthy of counseling, it's Black folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going to speak to Black women, what I would say is, again, thank you for all you do, and it's time for you to also take care of you. Like, you literally have fed the country from your bosom, literally and figuratively. But at some point, it's also important that you've got to be fed as well. And so I think that, again, the idea of the strong Black woman, yes, Black women are strong, and yes, all of us need help. Like that's what your strength comes from. That's how we would sustain. But I mean, I think there's a difference between being strong versus being unaffected by anything. And I think that we as a country, as a community, have often taken Black women for granted. And basically it's like, oh, you can power through that. You can power. And again, it's past time. Like, stop. We don't need to power through. You deserve better than that. And what I would just simply say is that I think one of the things for me in my practice, I'm blessed and fortunate to have Black women that I work with and actually do things with and get to see them work with other Black women. And just like Yolanda, you almost have to see it sometimes. You can just see the relief come out of somebody's face. When somebody is connecting and they're actually saying, somebody gets exactly what you're going through, somebody actually shows a pathway through what you're going through, and you can see somebody that is almost like 30, 40, 50, 60 years of holding something in. It's just like, and honestly, and I mean, I've had sessions that we've done, group sessions, that for me, it just touches me to see somebody, like, you can see it again, the tears
in the face. Yeah.
But it's a relief. It's not a painful. It's a like, I get to breathe for the first time ever, and I think that time is here.
So Deborah has a great comment, but I want to and Brittany, I see your question. I want to come back and circle back to that in a second. And this is kind of a great segue to what we talked about, how some of these thoughts of being strong and powering through, and some of that's directly related to what the church teaches us, that you don't have to handle it, give it to God. But what does that really mean? You know what I mean? So, and not allowing people to be vulnerable in that space and still be good church folk, if you will. I'm a preacher's kid. I was very lucky to have a father who did not force religion on me in such a way that it had the opposite effect. Now, I kind of did get away with stuff, but that's anyway. But you know what I'm saying? I said I didn't have that where it may. I was very much the other way, on the other spectrum. Like, I didn't want to let folks down. Sounds like a lot of us as kids in that situation. But I think she raises a good point in terms of what the church and religion teaches us about being strong and how that may be counterproductive to good mental health and good mental health awareness. What do you think about that?
No, I would say that lots of times the church has done it wrong, right? And I can say that as a lifelong Christian elder, Presbyterian church, like I said, grew up Amy Zion, everything else, but lots of times we've been miseducated. Again, if you think about, I mean, one of the things that's always interesting to me is, like, I've heard people even, and this, like, I think working with people in recovery, I think has been one of the things that's really made it hit home in a different way, Yolanda. Like, thinking about, again, the way a lot of people show up to a 12-step meeting. Like, we say in the church and things like that, come as you are. They actually practice come as you are, right? It doesn't matter how you show up there. And if you have an openness to the idea of some kind of recovery or healing, it's all good. Whereas lots of times for a lot of us, especially us good church folks, it's been like, you need to make sure you come in and putting your best foot forward and everything else. And it's like, if I can't put my worst foot forward in church, then where can I put it forward, right? And so to me, I think the other thing is, when we talk about the concept like faith without works is dead. And like, so going back to myself, I remember trying to pray my way out of my depression and anxiety. I remember sitting there thinking, like, man, part of this is the fact that I'm not operating in the same way of my faith as I did before, or whatever else like that. And I think I've reached a point to recognize that, again, these things are not competing things, right? these are things that can work together. You know, I have one of my other clinicians is an ordained minister, but he's an ordained minister that is affirming and things like that. Because again, if we're going to talk about the church and the role it has, we're gonna go there. Part of it is absolutely it saying to us that we almost feel like, hey, God's not going to put you through anything you can't handle, and we have those kind of things. And so, but the way we hear that, it is some of us hear that as like, if I feel like I can't handle it, then it must be my faith is wrong, right? But that's not what it is. But at the same time, I can't handle everything by myself. But then if I take it a step further, if we're talking about the church, I think when you talk about LGBTQ things like that, and if you talk about somebody who's Black and LGBTQ, you're talking about dealing with racism on one end, then you're dealing with homophobia, transphobia on the other end. And it's like, so we're looking at talking about isolation. When you were talking before about those stats about biracial and about LGBTQ they didn't shock me, because what I know is that human beings are about belonging and about connection. And so to me, I think one of the things that's been good for me to see is over the last couple of years, we've had churches reach out to us about coming and doing conversations, about doing presentations, because people in the church deal with mental health challenges and addiction as much as anybody. And the question the church has to ask itself, and I'm using that term, the church has to ask itself, is, are we really going to live into the full principles of being a place that really welcomes everybody at whatever place you're in, and really leaning into that? Or are we going to say that and ultimately just be another version of a country club?
Very well said. Now, as we wrap up, I do want to jump on Brittany's question, where she asked, how can you check in a meaningful way if people have not yet recognized they're really struggling? So if you told yourself you're okay, how is a friend supposed to notice otherwise? That's a great question. It
is a great question. And I'm going to give two pieces to it. So the first thing I want to say is that if you know somebody who's died by suicide, I don't want people to walk around here sitting there thinking to yourselves that this is somehow my fault, right? I think that sometimes we can reach out and want to help somebody, and sometimes the disease wins. Sometimes it's bigger than us, right? I can say that as a clinician who's worked with people and seen them do well, and then also see them die, whether it's by overdose or by suicide or something like that. It's the same way that if somebody's a surgeon, they may do great work and everything else like that, but at some point, the oncologist, the cancer may, in the end, take someone out. And so I say that just for people. I don't want anybody here who's sitting there who's thought to themselves, so-and-so died and they died on my watch. That means that I'm a bad friend, I'm a bad parent, I'm a bad whatever else. Secondly, going back to your question directly, Brittany, I think one, you absolutely can you can do the asking, but then sometimes you got to do the go by. Sometimes you got to do like I said, my now wife did. She literally came by my dorm room and saw me face to face and said, "Hey, let's go eat. Hey, let's sit down together." Sometimes it's a lot easier to lie through text, through phone, through everything else than it is face to face. It doesn't mean we can't lie to face to face. But I would say is I would check in by sometimes, especially since, and I'm saying since you put things in the chat already, if I've had my own journey of something that I've dealt with, sometimes it's just being able to acknowledge, like, man, I've had a rough time and everything else like that. And so I just don't want to take for granted that everybody else starts. So I just want to come by and check in on you, because I know for me, I've been struggling, and I just want to see how you were doing, and they may say that they're fine. Okay. But I'm going to keep coming back. And I think that's the thing, is I'm going to keep coming back. We're going to do things together, but I'm also going to try to watch. I'm going to notice, are they withdrawing more? Are they shifting? Are their behavior shifts and everything like that? Because I think one of the things is sometimes people, we have our own denial, right? And with denial is don't even know I'm lying, right? So I think I am fine. That's the thing, is I'm not consciously lying to you. I think, like, I thought I had it under control when I was in school. Like, as bad as things were, I thought I had it under control. So what I would say, Brittany, is one, physically go by where possible. If you need to set up the Zoom connections because they're in a different town or whatever else like that, do what you can to see people while you talk to them. So again, don't let it get by with just the text or just the call. Do what you can to have the face-to-face. But also understand that again, we can only do what we can do, and sometimes it's bigger than us as well. So.
Very good question. Like Chandria said, put your eyes on them. Don't just rely on that. Last question I want to jump on before we get to the Sue part of the show. Chris asked also a very good question. Is it possible to get help and not be prescribed medication? Because I think that's another thing that people have anxiety over in terms of being just prescribed medication for things like depression, anxiety, things of that nature.
Absolutely. No, it absolutely is possible to do that. And for most clinicians, I say for most of us, we're going to see you before that idea even comes up, and that idea may not come up, right? And I always tell people, it's like all of us are puzzles. Some of us are 10-piece puzzles, some of us are 1,000-piece puzzles. For some people, medication is a part of the puzzle that makes that puzzle complete. For other people, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a part of it. And so if the fear is that if I go to talk to somebody, I'm going to have to go get medication. So again, psychiatrists do medication, all right? But if you just go see a counselor, a therapist, a clinical social worker, a psychologist, and things like that, we don't prescribe medication. And so again, you're going to have conversation. It may be art, it may be movement, but at the same time, you can do all of that without medication having to come into play.
Excellent question, Chris. Okay, so we can go on for another couple of hours. So listen, Justin, when we do this second show, we got to tackle the issues of mental health in a deeper dive when we talk about that as far as the church is concerned, definitely regarding the criminal justice system and how we can do a better job of erasing the stigma. So the last thing that I always do with my guests is call Sue. So I give you 3 questions. You can't think about it. You just have to answer the question. And it tells us a little bit about you. So we're going to flip the script on you. So how about that? All right. Man, question number. This is the first one's easy. So what's the worst food you've ever had?
Liver as a kid.
Man, you ain't country. I thought you were country.
Look, hey,
not even with onions.
There's a lot of country I do. Liver it just never crossed over. There's something crossed over. That one ain't crossed over.
I'm a little disappointed. Okay, that's okay. All right. So name something that people like or they enjoy, but you just don't understand it.
Snow games.
I don't even know what that is. What's snow games of those?
I don't even know either. I'm a grizzly bear. That's what I always tell people. Like, look, man, I played out there with my kids, but all the stuff that can tear my knees up at this point right now, like, no, that's just not for me.
I thought you were gonna say like the crate challenge and stuff like that. The challenges that you see, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's its own beast, right?
You're not doing that. Okay.
Well, your parents, my own health bills now. You know, I don't do any of that stuff now. I got to pay my own stuff right now. It's different. Yeah.
I got you. So at least you got some cosigners. Some other people don't like liver, and Trinavia says she's not really down with the gizzards. I don't know if that means she's down with the gizzards or not down. I'm just shocked that you don't like liver and onions. I mean, okay. Anyway, I'm kind of judging. Okay. Actually, I got another.
Olives.
Say what now?
Olives my other joint. Yeah, I don't do olives.
You don't eat olives?
No, that's about it. But yeah.
You don't eat olives? Did I hear that right?
You heard that right.
Oh, okay. I'm about to cut it down, shut it off, y'all. Okay, we're done. Okay, anyway. Okay, last 2 questions. Superhero power. You are the superhero of the world. What is your superpower? Go.
Connecting people.
We need like Marvel, Star Wars level superpowers. That's a human power. I said superhero. Come on, what you got?
My superpower is making people not feel pain, man. It's making people not feel pain.
Okay, we're gonna have to jazz that up. So you're gonna have something that you can just put over people and they don't feel pain. I like that. But we got to jazz that up.
Healing hand, man. You know, it's got that healing hand.
Okay, so we can call you the healing hand man. I like that. That's actually a good one. That's a good one. Are you a Marvel or Star Wars person?
Man, see, I'm a sports person, man. This is what happens. I'm a sports person.
So you're not down with either? No Chewbacca,
this is what I'm saying. I watch some Marvel stuff, but when people say they're a Marvel person, that means that they watch everything that comes out. I don't watch everything that comes out. I know.
Yeah, I probably should stop here before I
know,
start
man.
judging you for real. Jamar said I'm already judging you, but
yeah, no, we came on. So clearly, my superpower is not connected because we came on here connected, Yolanda, and I feel like we're drifting apart. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Pain shield right there. There we go. Chandria's coming through for me out here. So there we go.
Yes, the pain shield. Yeah, we'll work with that. So listen, y'all. Thank you so much, Justin. So I want to make sure everybody gets your information. If you missed the top of the show, definitely go back when we talked about his story. Share this because there's a ton of really good information in here. I also dropped in the comments a couple of options to be able to get more information in the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Psychology today. I put in there that in the comments, Psychology Today as well. If you want to get in touch with Justin directly, you can find him online at justinperrycounseling.com. His number is 704-908-4061. You also offer a number of classes. So I actually am getting ready to sign up for the meditation one because I really need to learn how to meditate. That's the hardest thing for me to settle my mind because it's always 5,000 things going on at one time. So that's something I'm definitely interested in because I've tried it. I'm not good at it. I need some help.
Yeah.
Because it's the least little thing. I'm done. So
you think about that liver and onions. You start thinking about that liver and onions.
I mean, it's I'm trying to meditate. Justin said he don't like liver. I don't understand. So now my whole zen is gone. So, but all jokes aside, definitely visit the website. You offer a number of services from substance abuse, counseling, all of that. And if you're not able to assist, I know your staff can help point people in the right direction. The thing that I want you all to get out of this tonight is that 1, you're not alone. 2, there's a number of things that we've all dealt with on various levels to be able to acknowledge that, to have good self-awareness. Self-care is key, whatever that looks like. We didn't really get a chance to kind of dive into that. I'd like to do that on the follow-up. And then also just be aware that there should never be a stigma for you taking care of yourself. So whatever you need to do to advocate for yourself, especially to advocate for yourself with medical providers, to advocate for your loved ones in medical provider situations. Justin did a great job talking about some of the common myths regarding counseling. Please go back and check that out if you weren't able to see that. And it's okay. You don't have to be the strong woman, the strong man all the time. That's not what you're designed to be. You're designed to be human. You're designed to have emotions. You're designed to feel. You're designed to experience. And that's what's healthy. So I definitely want you to reach out to Justin. Definitely also follow him. Your IG page is just Justin Perry Counseling. Go make sure that you follow him on IG. There's a Facebook page that you can also like as well. He's always available, or he or a member of his staff is available to answer questions. We are definitely going to have a part 2, y'all, because we didn't get a chance to get into some of the meaty, controversial issues. We will definitely do that the next time. And of course, if you haven't already done so, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe to all things at the Convo Pod Show. We are going to overlook the fact that you have an issue with olives. I'm really struggling with that. But anyway, that being said, our next episode, I'm continuing this whole idea of love for the month of February. So next week's conversation is personal conversations. It's going to be with Troy Spry. Now, if you don't know who Troy is, I need you to go look him up on IG. He is a dating and relationship coach. We're going to be talking about that from a male's perspective. And I was very intentional this month. I wanted to have male guests. I wanted to have a specifically male guest as it relates to mental health, specifically a male guest as it relates to relationships. He has a book out called Teach Me How to Love. His IG page is golden as far as content, as far as dealing with various issues. And man, we're going to have a real talk conversation. So we'll be right back here next week live, the 23rd at 8:00 here on Facebook and on YouTube. So slide over to, there's a Linktree link, both on the IG page, the Facebook page, if you want to go back and catch past episodes. If you don't have the link, of course, we'll be posting it throughout. Thank you guys so much for being open and honest. For those of you who are watching, as far as the questions, as far as that is concerned, definitely make sure you share this particular broadcast. We will be back very soon to have a part 2 because we got a lot to talk about. Ripple effects, stigma, all of that in a way that might ruffle some feathers, but we need to have those conversations if we're going to be really serious about our mental health. So when I say stay strong, when Justin says stay strong, be strong, but also know when you don't have to be strong, when it's time for you to be able to take care of yourself, because I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. You can't be good to other people until you take better care of yourself, whatever that looks like. So final word to you, sir. Anything, what would you like for people to know?
So 2 things. One, I want to shout out Monica Wood, who's the intern on our team, life experience Black woman. So again, if you're looking somebody who needs reduced fee counseling and everything like that, even free counseling, she is available. The last thing I'll say is going back to that strong thing. I think recognizing that sometimes there's strength and vulnerability, right? So again, the strongest thing we can do is actually to reach out for help. I think that was one of the most challenging things for me. And so I think it actually is strong to reach out for help. And in the end, that's just going to make us that much better in the end. So I'm grateful to be on your show, Yolanda. I'm grateful for you the way you show up and what you're doing. And again, I'm looking forward to part 2 and continuing this work and continuing this journey.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking about this from a social justice perspective, which is both of our jams. So yes. Thank you so much. I'm going to send you some olives, some really good ones tomorrow, just because I'm petty. Have a wonderful night. Everyone, have a wonderful night, everyone. Take care of yourselves and definitely take care of each other. We will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.